If you're watching this video right now, someone who has done our program has shared this video with you. Or you have watched some of our content on our social media platforms, or you've reached out for help. And you might be in a relationship or a marriage that's struggling. And we want you to know that what you're dealing with is normal. We speak to hundreds of couples who are dealing with a particular dynamic that is really the cause of a worldwide epidemic that is having marriages fail.
If you're a woman, you're likely watching this video feeling overwhelmed, stressed, exhausted, tired from having to carry it all. And likely having the experience like you have to be everything to everyone, because if you don't do it and you are not handling it all, then everything's gonna fall apart.
And men, if you are feeling over-criticized, underappreciated, and that nothing you do can make her happy, then listen up. Because these experiences in relationships today are happening all over. And we want to explain, first of all, that the solution that we have is distinct from traditional therapy. We have spoken to hundreds of couples, and we have experienced it ourselves, that therapy is just not effective because you walk in, you have a 55-minute session, you barely kind of get into the topical issues that you probably are arguing about, and halfway through the session, you experience being more angry than when you walked in. And we've had this experience. Now, we are Mark and Michelle Landau. We are a normal couple. And 10 years ago, we fell in love. And we were soulmates. And 6 years ago, shortly after our second child was born, we were fighting. We were getting into it. And we were throwing out the word divorce. And we know underneath that we really do love each other. But there was resentment that was building and building and building. And that is probably what you're experiencing in your relationship right now. In fact, a lot of couples that we speak to, they don't even feel the love anymore. It's so buried underneath all of the resentment that they can't experience the love that they have for their partner. So we're going to explain what's happening.
And more importantly, we want you to know that what you're dealing with is not unique to you. This is happening on a global scale. This is the dynamic that is causing the 60% divorce rate of first-time marriages, 72% divorce in second marriages, and 93% divorce in third marriages.
Most people within 7 to 13 years of marriage are getting divorced today. And we're saying divorce is not the answer. Separation is not the answer.
New tools are the answer.
Exactly.
And we're here to show you those tools.
So let us explain how this dynamic began. So if we go back all the way to World War I and World War II, 85% of the male population went to war. So you have to imagine these 16, 17-year-old boys. And they were thrown into boot camp and they were trained to kill. And a few months goes by and they connect. You know, they become connected with their teammates. And then a few months later, they're running up a beach at war, charging the enemy, and the guy next to them that they met a few months ago gets his head blown off, and the guy to the left of him disappears in a puff of pink mist. And they're expected to keep going, to charge forward. How do you do that? Well, I'll tell you. They had to emotionally shut down and forge ahead.
Meanwhile, the women back at home had to step up. They had to go into the factories, build ammunition. They had to provide for the kids. They had to take care of their mother and their father, their mother-in-law, their father-in-law. And so they had to step into this masculine, driving, leading state. They had to become everything to everyone.
And you're probably having that experience today. Now you also have to imagine that their children were also watching this. The baby boomer generation, they started to model these behaviors of what it was to be in a relationship. So when the men came back from war, if they came back, they were emotionally shut down. And all they wanted was peace. Sound familiar, gentlemen? And the women noticed this. And they had to keep that masculine state, because if they dropped it, then everything would fall apart, because they noticed that the men were emotionally shut down.
Let's take this one step further. What about the baby boomer generation that were the children of these men and women? And those of us who are parents know that our children don't learn what we tell them. They learn what is modeled to them. So these children modeled a mother in her masculine state and a father who was shut down emotionally and just wanted peace. And at that point, if you look at the statistics, the divorce rate before World War I and World War II was 10%, and then it jumped to 40% after World War II.
And then fast forward to the 1960s and 1970s. It was all about the rise of feminine power. Women were equal to men. And yes, while we're equal, we are not the same. We are biologically wired differently. So I want to show you some of those differences. Women have 5 language centers in their brain, and men have 1. On average, women use 28,000 words a day. On average, a man, if he's lucky, uses 7,000. And a woman is wired for safety and security. That is evolution, millions of years of evolution. So their brains are constantly going to see if they are safe. And everything is connected to everything.
The dinner tonight is connected to the kids' hobbies, which is connected to the finances, which is connected to your stress levels, which is connected to your intimacy with your partner. So in our brain, everything is connected, and that's not the case for men.
And what happens in a relationship is how a woman de-stresses is they have to talk. They have to use their words.
Because when a woman talks, the more she gets her words out, the more her cortisol levels drop, the stress hormone, and the oxytocin rises, which is the connection hormone. So the more a woman talks, the more connected she feels to you, gentlemen.
Exactly.
But here's the dilemma.
So if a woman is in her masculine state, she will come to you using her words, but it comes out as, you never do this. You always do that. How come you're doing this? Why are you doing this? And then the man feels attacked. And what do? We defend ourselves. Or we emotionally shut down, or we blow up and get emotional. But all of those reactions are a sign that a man is in his feminine state. Now, this is hard to hear for men. So if I were to tell a woman that she's in her masculine state, they already know that. They feel a sense of recognition. But it's harder for a man to hear that because we think, well, what are you calling me, a sissy or a girl? And we're not saying that at all. Everybody has a masculine and a feminine dynamic to them and has access to both of those states. So 6 years ago, when we were fighting a lot, I was mostly in my feminine state.
And I was certainly in my masculine state. I mean, for the gentlemen watching, if you feel like your wife is, for better words, an emasculating, that would be a clear sign that she's in her masculine state. But again, our culture didn't teach us anyway. And why she's operating from that place is because she feels she has to. Because she feels she has to keep it all together or all hell's gonna break loose.
And every time she comes to you to communicate, she feels unheard because we're defending ourselves. So this dynamic that happens in thousands and thousands of relationships is the cause of failure in marriage today. So in our work that we do, we offer strategies to combat this dynamic. But here's the real problem. How many of you have taken courses or read books and learned strategies but were unable to implement them? We have both experienced that. We have done a lot of personal development work, but all the tools that we had were not helping. And why that was because of our conditioning. And every human being is who they are from their conditioning, from life events, from our culture, and from our role models. And what happens, why you cannot implement, is because of that conditioning. So you can have all the strategies in the world, but if your conditioning won't allow you to implement them, then they're useless. So in our work, we offer a 3-day, fully immersive experience where you get to put the kids aside for a weekend, your work aside for your weekend, and you get to put your marriage first. And you get to look at the conditioning and remove the conditioning that has caused you to have these patterns that keep happening over and over and over again in your relationship. And it's why communication fails, because you don't have an understanding of the masculine and feminine dynamics, the differences between men and women.
So in our event, we work on 3 things. 1, we've already explained the cultural dynamic that has happened over the last 100 years that has impacted the dynamic in relationships globally, really. Number 2, we look at your conditioning in terms of your role models. Did you have a role model for what it is to have an extraordinary marriage? And do you find yourself, playing out the same dynamic that you modeled as a child? Once again, we're going back to modeling, right? So much of what we learn about how to be in relationships comes from our models. We break those down and you get to create a new way that you want to be in your relationship. Not determined by our culture, not determined by your role models and the tools that you got, because the truth is, most of us didn't get the tools to have a lasting, thriving relationship that feels like you're in the honeymoon stage and that it gets better with every year. And we can say with 100% certainty, we live that. It gets better every day. And lastly, life events. What has happened in your life that has potentially closed your heart off to love. 70% of women have experienced some sort of trauma around sexuality. That affects our levels of intimacy and how much pleasure we can experience with our loved ones. So all of these facets of the diamond, we look at all of those areas to look and see, where have you guarded your heart? Where have you created distance? Where has resentment been built between you and your partner?
And the problem arises is that when there's so much resentment in the relationship, one or both of you have a back door. And when you close the back door, like really close it, like we are in this together, real healing can begin. And you really can have your relationship be about that. Be about healing all of it together. All of your life, even before you came together, that those traumas that you have can be healed by your love together.
So let us illustrate this for you. When you start a relationship, everything's beautiful. You're in the honeymoon stage. You're texting till 3 a.m. And then you're plugging along and you have a disagreement. And you don't really have the tools to fully resolve it. So you put a little brick in between you and your partner. Now, in the beginning, you don't really feel it because there's just so much love and they're the sun and the stars and the moon. And you get into another disagreement. You don't have the skills to fully resolve that. So another brick gets laid. And before you know it, there's so many bricks laid that it feels like a brick wall of resentment between you that you couldn't even imagine it not being there. And we're here to tell you, it's not only possible, it's guaranteed. In 3 days, you can take apart those resentments and get to a clean slate and start really rebuilding an incredible relationship together. But you can't build it on top of those bricks. You need to clean up the mess that's there and rebuild it from the ground up. And remember, your kids are watching. So for those of you who are looking at divorce, what do you want to model for your kids? Do you want to model being right and quitting? Or do you want a model when life gets tough? You roll up your sleeves, you learn the tools, and you do the work? I think most of us would want to do whatever we could to teach our children that when life gets hard, you don't quit. You roll up your sleeves, you do whatever it takes, and you do the work.
So a lot of the couples that find us are sometimes at the end. This is a last-ditch effort to save their marriage. And time again, we do that. We have a 96% success rate over 29 years doing this work.
And if there's infidelity, even if you think there's no way that we could come back to love, we want you to know that we've seen it happen. Divorce is hard on everyone.
Yeah.
And although you might think it's the answer, and for some of you, although you think that might be the answer, consider that's what our culture says you should do when it gets hard. But what if our culture said, no, you roll up your sleeves and you learn the tools because they weren't modeled to you or to your partner? You have to have compassion for each other, that they didn't learn the tools for how to show up for you the way that you need, but they're absolutely learnable. It might be temporary relief, but it does create lifelong challenges both for you and your children. If you look at the statistics, children of divorced marriages have greater levels of anxiety, depression, suicide, learning disability.
And it's not you that's going through the divorce only. It's your children also that are getting a divorce.
Yes.
So if anything we've said speaks to you or hits the nail on the head, here's what to do next. Click the link below, schedule a discovery call with us. We will get to know you, you will get to know us, and we'll take a deep dive into your current situation and really have you get how this work can turn things around for you. We really want to thank you for listening and watching this today. We know reaching out for help when your relationship is struggling is hard. And for us, we experienced shame because we expected ourselves to just have our marriage work and have it last.
Because we have to awaken to the Disney culture that says when you find your forever person or when you get married, you live happily ever after. And those of us that have been married for a long time know that that's absolutely not the case. And reaching out and seeking support in your marriage takes so much courage. Because we live in this Instagram world where we only show the pretty parts. But this is where the real work is done. When you roll up your sleeves, when you tell the truth, and reach out for guidance and mentorship and support. We know that if you're watching this video, there's still a glimmer of hope inside. And sometimes you have to take a leap. So click the link below, schedule a discovery call with us, and we cannot wait to meet you.
We look forward to seeing you soon.
Bye for now.
Trying to win your heart, trying to get to where you are. And I would live a million lonely lifetimes if I knew I could get back to you. Yeah, I just wanna get back to you. May take some time, don't wanna find no one but you in my arms. If it's a test,